This episode is brought to you by Peak Performers. What if the talent your team needs has been there all along, but you simply have not had a way to find it? Peak Performers helps organizations tap into a powerful and often overlooked talent pool. Professionals with disabilities. These are people who bring resilience, creativity, and strong problem-solving skills to their work, and who stay longer once hired. For more than 30 years, Peak has combined smart recruiting tools with genuine human connection to help organizations hire more inclusively and effectively. Learn how they can help you build stronger teams at peakperformers.org. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast. I'm your host, executive coach, speaker, and author, Marcel Schwantes. I believe that when we show up with our full humanity to work and lead from a place of love, joy, purpose, care, and inclusion, it's going to make a radical difference in your leadership, your business, and your bottom line. This is a show about actionable, practical love, the verb, as a leadership and business strategy. Let's get rolling. Hey gang, welcome back. I hope your new year is off to a great start, and thank you for joining us today. We got a treat for you, folks. Okay, if you're a longtime listener and if you're a fan of classic management books that stand the test of time, no doubt you probably have a book by Ken Blanchard in your library, I'm guessing. So I have been blessed and truly honored to have Ken on the show twice. If you want to take a trip down memory lane, check out episode number 3. Yeah, Ken was guest number 3. Can you believe it? When basically our audience was just crickets. And he came on the show. Okay, episode 3, I'll have that on the show notes. Also check out episode 122. And I'll have that in the show notes as well. So Ken is truly one of the most influential leadership thinkers of our time. Every now and then I dust off my copy of the 1 Minute Manager, one of the best selling leadership books in history. And I always find new gems in there. Every time I read it again, I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't catch this the first time, right? And it's a short book. So check that out if you haven't yet. To be honest, Ken has shaped how I lead and how I coach leaders as well. I mean, he has been that instrumental in my life and work. So today, we get to honor Ken Blanchard by talking about his life, his legacy, the difference he's made in the world, what makes Ken Blanchard the person that he is. And to do all that, I'm going to need some help, okay? I am just as honored to have on the show today Martha C. Lawrence. Martha is Ken's prolific longtime collaborator and publishing executive. She's worked side by side with Ken Blanchard for over 2 decades, okay? And she just wrote a captivating book out right now called Catch People Doing Things Right, How Ken Blanchard Changed the Way the World Leads. There is the cover if you're watching on YouTube. So this is a book that is part business biography, part human interest story in a way that only Martha could capture. Okay, so she drew from decades of Ken's personal letters, interviews, behind the scenes stories, and there are a lot of stories. And so Martha paints really an intimate portrait of a man that has been wildly successful, but also a man that overcame personal challenges and professional roadblocks early on to eventually become one of the greatest management thinkers, consultants, and authors of all time, really. So let me give our distinguished guest a proper introduction. Okay, Martha Lawrence is a veteran book editor and the executive editor at Blanchard Companies. Okay, she has edited hundreds of books, including Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, and co-authored Trust Works with Ken Blanchard. She's also an author of an award-nominated mystery series and a passionate advocate for leading with kindness and purpose. I can't wait to dive into this conversation. Martha Lawrence now joins us. Welcome, Martha, to the Love in Action podcast.
It is just such an honor to be with you. I love what you do, and I'm just tickled pink to be sitting in this chair talking to you this morning.
I could say the same thing about you. We've bounced emails back and forth for a few years now, and I've already felt like I knew you before you came on, but you're so easy to get to know. You're so cordial and personable. So I'm thrilled about you being here.
Right back at you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you know how it's tradition on the show, right? We always ask our guest, "What's your story?" And so I really want to hear about your story. We know Ken's story, and this whole episode is going to be telling the story of Ken Blanchard, but we want to know about Martha Lawrence's story. So what's your story?
Well, first of all, the focus should be on Ken Blanchard because he's just such a phenomenal human being and leader. But, after that fantastic introduction, I think people know my story. Basically, I am a writer who has had the amazing luck to be Ken Blanchard's right-hand person for over 2 decades. I don't know what I did, Marcel, to deserve this honor. It's just, but I knew I couldn't squander it. I knew I could not have worked alongside a human being who not only was so innovative and intelligent and heart-centered, but who lived the same things he's teaching. I had to capture the story and share it with others so people could know this kind of human being exists in the world. And this kind of human being can become successful. We have so many stories of business leaders who, they do amazing things and they build giant companies and go into outer space and change technology and all those things, right?
Right.
But are they really role models? Are they really the kind of people we want to get to know and have in our lives and emulate? And Ken Blanchard's that guy.
Okay, I'm not going to let you off the hook that easily, okay? I want to know how this whole thing started because you've worked with Ken, over 20 years?
Yep.
So, how did you two connect?
Oh, how'd we connect? Okay, I started out at Simon Schuster in New York, working for the managing editor there, dream job, Rockefeller Center, really cut my teeth on the hardcore publishing world. And then I was an editor at Harcourt Publishers for many years. So I was that person who accepted or rejected your manuscript, right? That you sent in or your agent sent in. And that was very satisfying for a number of years. And then, one night before I stopped drinking, thank goodness, many, many years ago, I had probably too many drinks with one of my authors. And I said, Alan, I really want to be a writer. And he said, the day will come when you'll have to write your own book. You won't be able, if you're a writer, you'll have to do it. And by gosh, that day came. And it came because I had some life experiences that were really challenging. A serial rapist who had been convicted of serial rape before and served prison time broke into my house and raped me. Police caught him a year later. He had raped 9 women in that series. They put him away for pretty much the rest of his life. So, and then I had an ex-boyfriend who stalked me for 2 years. So those experiences kind of built up inside of me, and I had been reading mystery novels and crime novels. So I started, I think, kind of as a way to purge those experiences. I started writing crime novels and created a private investigator. So I became a novelist and did that for many years. That's how I paid my mortgage. And then 9/11 happened. And I was working on a big thriller, and I came back from a book tour and looked at that big thriller manuscript that I'd written about bad guys and good guys and evildoers. And I had a moment of clarity, and I said, okay, God, I'm not inspired by this. The world needs help, and I'm not using my talent to lift people up, and I don't know what to do because this is now how I make my living. And it was that week that I found out that Ken Blanchard, this author that I had admired for years and years, this was 2003, so I'd been admiring him for many years. He had a company. I didn't even know he had a company. I knew him from his work, his author work. And I stumbled across the Blanchard website, and it said, releasing the power and potential of people for the common good. And I said, I want to be a part of that. So I found out who staffed that company, the agency, and I said, I want to get a job here. I want to infiltrate. I always thought I'd still be a writer. I just wanted to get next to what they were doing and be inspired by it. And, so I actually I got a temp position there. And then somebody found out that Martha Lawrence, the writer, the well-known writer, was temping. And they introduced me to Ken. And he needed a collaborator, and the rest is history.
You just dropped that story on us just like that. Oh my gosh, there is so much there, Martha. Oh my gosh, how much you've overcome, the incredible resilience that you have shown, the perseverance, the not giving up on what you felt is something you needed to do to reflect your values as a human being, right? And then the universe, whatever you want to call it, whatever your God is, your higher power, opened up that door for you. And
that's exactly right.
Yeah,
so I hope that listeners take away from that story. Listen deep to your heart, and the universe will rise up and support you.
Hang tight, folks. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
I want to take a moment to tell you about Peak Performers. They are a nonprofit staffing agency that helps organizations discover what they call talent without limits. Peak specializes in connecting employers with professionals with disabilities, an incredible source of untapped talent that many hiring systems miss. What stands out about this group and why employers love working with them is that they often bring exceptional resilience and a natural ability to solve problems. They also tend to stay longer, which means greater retention and more stability for teams. For more than 30 years, Peak has used a blend of smart recruiting tools and genuine human connection to help organizations hire in a more equitable and effective way. If you want a hiring approach that brings out the very best in people and strengthens your organization, visit peakperformers.org. So was there a specific turning point during this whole journey with Ken where you knew, okay, I gotta write a book about Ken?
Yeah, not long after I started working with him. And first of all, how prolific is this man? I mean, he has published 70 books. And this was in the days before you could just push a button and self-publish. I mean, that's with legitimate publishers. And, and I saw how brilliant he was, how compelling a speaker he was, how original his thinking was. And then the way he galvanized people around him, the way he lifted up the energy in a room. And I was just like, somebody has to write his life story. And, nobody really, when I floated the idea at Blanchard, and people didn't necessarily get right into it. They were like, well, we're busy doing this other work. And Ken doesn't have an ego. He didn't need a story written about him. That wasn't something that appealed to him. And so I put it aside. I started collecting materials thinking someday a really good biographer is going to come along and write his story, and then the years passed and the years passed. And then finally, when COVID hit, and there was, everyone was home, I just pulled out this I had a giant bin of more than that, actually, but this one giant bin full of letters and journals and his doctoral dissertation and all that kind of stuff. And I just started sketching out what the biography would be, what the chapters of his life were.
Did you ask him for all of that, all those documents? And how did you get access to them?
I told him, I said, I'm going to start collecting materials. Okay. I would like to, have this in place for your biography. And he's like, okay. And then once once he saw that I was serious, he introduced me to like childhood friends, and I talked to kids. I talked to people who've known him since fifth grade, college friends. The thing about Ken Blanchard is everybody's his friend, but the friends he's had for, 70, 80 years.
Yeah.
He's lifelong friends
Yeah.
and colleagues, and talk to Tom Peters, talk to just many people in his life. He calls them his co-competitors, right? Co-competitors. They're friends of his, but they're also in the same space.
That's great.
And so he got on board with the idea. And then his wife Margie, bless her heart, she had kept the Christmas letters since 1965, all in a binder, very organized. So that was a wonderful chronology because you could see what he'd been doing every year. So there's lots of documentation that I had to draw from.
Oh, that must have been a blast. I mean, I can't imagine how good the research was when you stumble into all these little gold nuggets of information you didn't know before, right?
Correspondence with Colin Powell and Donald Trump, and all these famous people who Ken had relationships with.
He actually met Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yes, he met Dr. Martin Luther King. That was when he was a freshman at Cornell, and he happened to be one of the ushers the day that Dr. Martin Luther King came to Sage Chapel to preach, and Ken met him and was super impressed by how not only did Martin Luther King have this message of love, but he treated Ken and his buddies with so much love and respect. And Ken, that was a big influence on Ken. It was like, okay, he's preaching a certain thing from the pulpit, but he's also living that. I feel that from him.
That's great. Now, folks, before you start wondering, I know we're talking in past tense. Ken is very much alive and doing well, which leads me to my next question. How is he doing?
He's 86 years young. He's taking life at a slower pace these days. So he's stepped back from doing, public speaking and things like that.
Yeah.
But I see him regularly. I go over and we shoot the breeze, and yeah, he's doing well. But
Good.
he's definitely slowed down a bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So you probably know Ken as good, if not better, than most people. My impressions. These are my impressions of Ken. I've only talked to him twice, and I read his books. I go on YouTube, but he has videos out there, etc. My impressions of Ken is that he is very humble. I don't even know if he knows how humble he is, but it's all real, because some people will be humble, but it's almost kind of an act they put on, if you know what I mean. And Ken is real as they come. So how would you describe it in your own words, having been with the man for 20 years?
Yeah. You hit on a good one, Marcel, because that humility, it is just baked into him. He really, I could say, well, he learned it from his mom. His mother, his mom and dad were his big role models. His mom taught him, you're not better than anyone else, but no one else is better than you. There's a pearl of goodness in everyone, so dig for it. But, a lot of us, we've all had those messages of humility. Ken just seems to really genuinely not think he's a big deal. He just doesn't. Somebody asked him once, how did you attain all of this that you've attained? And he said, I feel like it's a blessing I've received more than a strategy I've employed. He just doesn't really take credit for a lot of, he learned, he says, if you don't toot your own horn, someone else will come along and use it as a spittoon. So he did learn that lesson, but he's just genuinely humble.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Take us back to his childhood, maybe like it's, the influence, maybe his parents. You've already mentioned his mom had quite an influence on him. But how did his childhood shape the person that he is now?
Well, Ken admits that he was very blessed to have two parents who were incredible leadership role models. His dad retired as a rear admiral in the Navy, and taught him a lot, very consciously taught him leadership lessons. And one of the well-known stories that Ken tells is that he won the president of the seventh grade class. Ken showed leadership ability very early on. He was charismatic. People loved him. He had leadership positions from the time he was a kid. But he was all proud of himself. Seventh grade, he runs home. Mom, Dad, I'm the president. I'm the president of the seventh grade. And his dad pulled him aside and said, Ken, that's great. We are so proud of you. Now, let me teach you a little lesson about leadership. Now that you have that fancy title, president, don't ever use it. People follow leaders not because they have a fancy title, but because they trust them and they respect them. So be the kind of guy that people trust and respect. So, I mean, he was getting that at 12, 13 years of age, things like that.
Yeah. And again, I mean, he was getting it at that time when I'm listening to you share that story as if it was just a recent workshop or speaking engagement that he's delivered, right? It became his fundamental beliefs in those formative years that really has led to his success.
Yeah, and he watched his father. His father, the higher he went in the military, it's almost like, his best friends were the guys who weren't necessarily up at the officer level. So he was watching and learning. This is what a real leader does.
Yeah, Ken is the first one that introduced me to the bottom up or the inverted pyramid approach to leadership, which is completely counterintuitive, even to this day when most companies operate with the traditional hierarchy model, right? And Ken's like, no, we flip that.
Exactly.
And you're now at the bottom as a leader, supporting those above you. And that's still when I share that with people in my own speaking engagement, et cetera, I see people squirming in their chairs a little bit, right?
Exactly. It's so counterintuitive. Well,
is.
he talks about the pyramid, the servant leadership, how people think that's an oxymoron. How can you be a servant and a leader at the same time? Because we're so programmed to think that leaders are the boss, and you've got some amazing thing about from boss to coach, or what's your...
Right, from boss to leader, yeah.
Boss to leader. And so, but he talks about, the leadership part is setting the vision and the values and, kind of visioning that compelling picture of the future. But once that's done, you flip that upside down. And now as the leader, you are serving the people implementing that vision.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't imply weakness at all. You're still in charge. Now you're just equipping those to succeed. Wow. Okay. There are, I'm sure, people that helped shape Ken's views on leadership. I think we've already talked a little bit about some people but are there mentors that he could say, these are the people that shaped my views on leadership, maybe in the past, and maybe mentors that continue to this day to shape his views?
Excellent question. Well, we've talked about his parents, who definitely shaped his. He had a sister, Sandy, who also really shaped his leadership. She taught him a lot about buckling down and really, giving all of yourself to your work. A lot of his mentors were actually co-authors of his. He tended to not write books all by himself, which really annoyed his mother. She said, Ken, why don't you write a book by yourself? Your name will be in bigger letters on the cover. And he said, Mom, learning is one of my primary values. When I write with someone else, I learn. It's a lot more fun, and I learn something. And so one of his early mentors was Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, who's famous for the power of positive thinking. That was a huge thing. He used to preach at the Marble Collegiate Church in New York City, and that book was super, super famous back in those days. And Ken's publisher called him one day and said, hey, how would you like to write a book with Norman Vincent Peale? And he said, is he still alive? And he said, not only is he alive, he's fabulous. So Ken was in his 40s, and he met Dr. Peale, who was in his 80s. And that his philosophy of love and positivity, I think really, really influenced Ken. Ken was influenced by his co-editors. I talk about Stephen Covey, Peter Drucker, all the greats, Tom Peters. They used to pal around together, but these were people that can learn from. Yeah.
Yeah. That's sort of the Mount Rushmore for me of leadership thinkers, management experts. Ken's right up there with Drucker and Tom Peters for sure. And Covey, the late Stephen Covey.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, people probably don't realize that Ken also experienced some deep personal loss and professional rejection. Can you believe that? Yeah. Ken Blanchard experiencing rejection. Yeah, it happened. Share a little bit about that part of his life, and really, how did those moments kind of test his leadership philosophy?
Yeah, I love this because I think one of the takeaways from the book is that you don't have to be perfect to be successful. Ken was told in college that he couldn't write. It was like he was in the academic world, and they said, you can't write. You're not a good writer. Well, it's because he didn't have an academic style of writing. He had that breezy, accessible style of writing.
Conversational, like down to earth.
Exactly. And so he didn't listen to that, and went on to become one of the best-selling business authors in the world. He was also told that he didn't have enough academic interests, that he basically, if I translate it, they basically told him you're not smart enough. And yet he co-created the most widely developed leadership model in the world with Dr. Paul Hersey, situational leadership. And now Ken's version is SL2. So, no academic interest, give me a break. By his own admission, he couldn't even balance his own checkbook, and yet he founds a global leadership development company that's been around for 45 years. So the takeaway from that is that no matter what setbacks you have, don't believe your bad press, because, you can work around those things. Ken wanted to be a dean. He wanted to be a college dean. And then, he had some good interviews like at Dartmouth and stuff, and he never heard back from him. And he called him up and he said, I thought we had a good connection. And the guy said, we love you, Ken, but you've got terrible recommendations in your file. And those were the days where the Freedom of Information Act was not around and you couldn't see what was in your personnel file. And he found out that people had said all this stuff about him, that he wasn't smart enough, couldn't write, etc.
Right.
So, but he just kept his head up, looking for other opportunities, like his mother had taught him. Just, when life hands you lemons, just, turn it into lemonade. Keep your head up and look for opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, two things that stand out clearly for me is that Ken has a great sense of humor. I mean, that's clearly evident. I mean, the two times I brought him on the show, I was laughing. He's got his one-liners. You can't help it. It's funny. And the other is that he's not exactly known for following the rules, right? So give some examples of each, maybe, like a good story about his sense of humor and then not following the rules.
Okay. Well, we were talking a little before the show about Ken speaking. This was when he was a college professor, and he'd been developing these ideas, and he was invited to speak in front of the faculty and all that. And so before his speech, he used the men's restroom. I think this was in the Department of Education too. He was speaking to the Department of Education, and at that time, getting a degree in education was considered kind of flaky. So above the toilet paper roll, there was a little sign there that said, Department of Education diplomas, take one. And then he went to wash his hands, and there was one of those blow dryer hand dryers. And one of the people that he would be speaking to in the audience was Dr. George Ordine. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly. Ordine. He was famous for management by objectives, very well-known professor and management thinker. And so he's washing his hands, and he goes to dry his hands, and there's a sign above the hand blow dryer that says, for a lecture by Dr. Ordine, push here, because he was known as being a very long-winded guy, a blowhard. So what does Ken do? Ken goes from the bathroom in front of this audience, and he proceeds to tell those jokes to the audience and with Dr. Ordine in the audience, and he could get away with that. And I think that Ken, he has this quality, this innocent quality, that somehow he can do stuff and get away with it, whereas you or I might be, it just wouldn't land right.
Right.
He has this incredible sense of comedic timing and this innocence and this he's got a face that this guy couldn't hurt a fly, and you know it.
You know it. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You nailed it. The timing.
And so you had asked about unconventional, how Ken was unconventional and would break the rules.
Yeah.
And so Ken knows what the rules are. He's very aware of what the rules are, but if there's a rule that he thinks is stupid, he is not afraid to break it. And that's been true in his whole life. And so when he started teaching in university, he would hand out the final exam on the first day of class so the students could see what was going to be on the final. And when the faculty found out about that, they said, "Blanchard, what are you doing? You can't give the students the final on the first day of class." And he said, "Not only am I going to give the final on the first day of class, what do you think I'm going to do all semester? I'm going to teach them the answers. Because life is about getting A's. It's not about rank ordering people according to some stupid normal distribution curve." So he just thought that was such BS,
right,
that you just divide students up into good, medium, and bad. He wants everyone to win.
Yeah.
So rebellious, but rebellious with a purpose.
Yeah. So. At what point did Ken's famous servant leadership philosophy come about? Was that before the 1 Minute Manager, or when did that happen?
No, it wasn't before the 1 Minute Manager. Ken has always been people oriented, and the 1 Minute Manager. Just for a quick recap, the 3 secrets are 1 minute goal setting, 1 minute praising, and 1 minute. Used to be reprimand, now that's redirect. Because, side-by-side leadership, we don't top-down reprimand people anymore. But back in the 80s, that was still considered okay languaging. But that 1 minute praising, that's the part that Ken really, really vibed with, that you want to lift people up. You want to catch them doing things right, which is the name of this biography. It's based on, somebody asked him, if you could only take away one teaching from your whole life, what would it be? And he said, catch people doing things right. People don't get enough praising. Mm-hmm. But the servant leadership piece, that came along, he met Dr. Norman Vincent Peale after the 1 Minute Manager came out. Dr. Peale, was a Christian, very, influenced by Jesus. And Ken began to see that Jesus was kind of a great leadership role model. Take away the religion, take the religion out of it, and just look at what he did with people. So he started being more influenced by that, and then started understanding what Dr. Greenleaf had taught, which Dr. Greenleaf is the one who coined the term servant leadership. And so it really was a natural extension of what Ken had been teaching all along.
Yeah, thanks for tying that together. So let me bring the 1 Minute Manager into the discussion. Why, or maybe not why, but what do you think made it such a huge phenomenon back in the 80s?
Yeah. Well, in retrospect, it's kind of easy to see, because business books in those days, first of all, there weren't that many of them, but when they did come out, they tended to be very long and dry and boring and technical. And Ken just didn't have long, drying, boring, and technical in his DNA to write. So what happened was he was at a cocktail party I think it was 1980 in San Diego. He had written a textbook with Dr. Hersey called Management of Organizational Behavior, and that was used in universities for like 40 years. So he was at this author party, and he was introduced to Dr. Spencer Johnson, who had written a series of kids' books. And Margie kind of introduced Spencer to Ken, and she said, Spencer writes kid books. You're working on a book for managers. Why don't you write a children's book for managers? They won't read anything else. And so they kind of worked on this book together. And so I think the reason it hit, Marcel, is because it was only 100 pages. It was not a nonfiction narrative. It was a story. It was a parable about
Yeah.
a young man looking for an effective manager. And so people could read it in an hour. The publisher said, it's a bathtub book. You draw the hot water for your bath, you jump in, you read the book, and by the time the water is cold, you're finished. It didn't take a long time, and it had such great takeaways. And so I think it just revolutionized it became a pass along book. If somebody was promoted to a management position, it's like, what do I do? Well, read this. You'll know what to do.
Yeah, that's so good. So now I'm curious. That book was written in 1980, right? And
It was written in 80,
yeah,
published by William Morrow in 82. Yeah,
yeah. And you mentioned the three overarching principles of the one-man manager. Do you think that those principles still hold true today?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. All good performance starts with clear goals. That's as true today as it was ever,
Yeah,
probably in, Aristotle's time. Catch people doing things, praise, 1 minute praisings. Once you show someone what the goal is and they start performing, you want to praise them. Ken often talked about don't be a seagull manager. Don't be one of those managers who's never around until something goes wrong, and then they fly in, dump on everybody, make a lot of noise, and fly out. That's not what you want. You want to be there coaching and praising and supporting and encouraging and uplifting and catching people doing things right as they're implementing those goals. And then 1 minute redirects. It's like if somebody, I know you had Gary Ridge on the show. He talks
mhm,
about learning moments. There aren't
yeah,
mistakes, there's learning moments. When a quote mistake or something is not going according to plan, that's when you redirect.
yeah.
You come in and you redirect. And so yeah, they're as true today as ever.
You mentioned the Seagull manager, and I grinned widely because I remember Ken telling me about the Seagull manager, but the way that he said it just cracked me up in the middle of the recording. So it's just his style again,
Yeah,
his style.
that's it. I am Ken's biographer, but I cannot replicate Ken Blanchard. He just has that incredible gift. It's just a true comedic gift.
All right, so you had access to all of these documents, personal letters, journals, right? And maybe even some private stuff that you stumbled into. I don't know. Was there something in there that kind of surprised you that you didn't know about Ken?
You know, um, well, the surprising thing to me was how early his leadership philosophy started forming. And to see that his inclusiveness, the personality has always been there. It was surprising. I'd heard him talk about his education, his early education, but when I really started writing, I realized, oh, wait a minute. He went to school in the 1950s, in the early 1950s, mid 1950s. In the early 1950s, the schools were still segregated.
Mm,
So he went to an all white elementary school, but because he loved basketball, he had a killer outside jump shot. He had a lot of black friends around town. And so by the time the Supreme Court handed down Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 and desegregated the schools, and he went to a desegregated high school, he already had a lot of black friends. But what he noticed was that the school was still it may have been desegregated in theory, but it was still segregated in terms of how the kids were communicating with each other and siloed. And so he and his friend Bobby Bradshaw, who was a black kid, they started something called the Youth Fellowship. And it really surprised me when I was going through these old documents and I found this newspaper clipping from 1956. 1956. That's long before the civil rights movement, right? And here's Ken Blanchard, white as snow, Bobby Bradshaw, beautiful black kid, and there they are standing together. And there's a newspaper article about this organization that they started in their school, the Youth Fellowship, to bring the school together. And it's like that kind of stuff really surprised me, running across stuff like that. Like, wow, he is the real deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you end the book with, chapter 15 is leading with love. I think that's the title. And so I wanted to maybe wind down here and talk about that. I don't know if I ever told you, Martha, I told Ken this, by the way, and I think the second time he came on the show, which was 3 years after that guest number 3 slot, right? And the podcast was not called Love in Action when he came on the show as guest number 3. I don't even remember the name of the podcast. We were so new. We were still trying to figure stuff out. And I wasn't convinced of the title, right? It was just kind of a working title. But as I'm talking to Ken in episode number 3 and asking him to describe his views on servant leadership, Ken says this: servant leadership is love in action. And that moment just crystallized for me. And then after that, the show became Love in Action. And so I really attribute Ken for coming up with at least part of that. The phrase, came from a Ken Blanchard quote.
I have chills. I have chills. I want to tell you, I love the name of, I love your podcast, and I love the name of it so much because I've also been a writing teacher. And one of the things I teach my writing students is you don't tell people who the characters are, you show who they are. And how do you show? By the actions they take, by the decisions they make and the actions they take. So if you want to be a loving person in the world, you have to act on that love. And so, I love that. Love in action. It's very, don't just think about being a servant leader. Do something that shows you're a servant leader. And love is the most powerful force in the universe. I'll just go on record as saying it. It is what holds the universe together. And we're long overdue to have it in the workspace because everybody works. And if we're going to have a peaceful, loving world, it better be in the workspace too.
Yeah. Well put. Well put. Okay, as we wind down here, Martha, what's one question I have not asked maybe that's important for our listeners to know?
Oh, you've covered a lot of stuff. Well, I think the question for me that you haven't asked is, what are people going to get out of this book?
Yeah.
Yes. What are people going to get out of this book? And I would say this is an inspirational. If you want to see how someone was able to take that love and put it into action, this is a great case study in that. There's a discussion guide in the book that has you reflect on all the things that Ken did and how you might apply them to your story. And also, here's another one: catch people doing things right. What does that mean? Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. What is it? How do you do that? So we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Well, it doesn't mean you just slap someone on the back and go, "Attaboy, attagirl." It's a little deeper than that. It's caring enough about somebody to watch what they're doing, let it in, how their actions are affecting you and how they're improving your life and making you feel, and then feeding that back to them and saying, "Boy, Marcel, you have really made a difference in my life by showing me that these concepts can be taken and used to improve workplaces all over the world." Thank you for doing this. Thank you. It's encouraging.
Oh boy. Thank you for that. I'm thinking, we were talking about this offline, And I had another guest come on the show, a very well-known guest, and he wouldn't go as far as combining leadership with love or leading with love, but he would say caring. We have to care for our employees. We have to care for our people, for our stakeholders. And you said something interesting offline that I think caring only goes so far. And so there's a difference between love and care. Explain that.
Well, when I think of a caretaker, I think of someone who is going through the motions. Let's say you're taking care of someone who's ill. You can go through the motions of taking care of them and changing their dressing and giving them food and liquid without engaging your heart. You can get those actions done. Love involves the heart. And I think the problem that a lot of executives and people in the corporate space have is that, the Greeks had 20 different definitions of the word love. And the English language has a paltry word, love, for a lot of different things. And there's that fear that it's going to be associated with something erotic, right? Or something inappropriate. And love just means an open heart. That's what it is. And if you're a leader and you're not bringing your heart into the conversation, you're not being a little bit vulnerable, you're not showing that feeling, then you're not going to be connecting 100% with the person that you're trying to lead.
Yeah. Yeah. In a sense, I think that we need to deconstruct the word love that pop culture, movies, media has kind of ingrained in us. It's a false understanding of love when you talk about love in all those senses, romantic and sexual, etc.
Yes.
And I mean, the whole reason I wrote my book, Humane Leadership, is to have people understand that the love that we're talking about is agape in the Greek sense, agape love, which is backed by action. It's not something you feel; it's something you do on behalf of other people.
This is right.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah.
This is it. We need more of that. We need more of that in the workspace. People get so caught up in the numbers, or as Tom Peters calls it, the bean counters, and it's important to count the beans. As one of Ken's co-authors said, you take care of your numbers and your numbers will take care of you. It doesn't mean you don't do those things. It doesn't mean you're not accountable. It doesn't mean you don't focus on results. But relationships are just as important as the results, if not more important. They're the reason we're doing the results, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. All right, Martha, we've arrived at our speed round. Strap on the seatbelt. Here we go. Okay. What makes you smile when you get up in the morning these days?
Oh, what makes me smile is getting to publicize this book. I'm serious though. Ken Blanchard is such an inspiring human being, and it's such a privilege and such a joy to talk about him. It gets me up and gets me smiling.
Okay, if you weren't doing the work that you're doing now or have been doing for the last 20 years, what would you have chosen for a profession?
Well, before I met my ex-husband, I was pre-law. And I'm really glad I didn't take that path because I don't think it would have brought out the best in me. My honest answer, I think I would have loved to be a zookeeper. I love animals. I love the natural world. A zookeeper or a gardener. Or maybe a screenwriter. If I wasn't a writer of biographies and mysteries and things like that, maybe a screenwriter.
I can see that. Okay. Ken Blanchard notwithstanding, who is someone that inspires you right now?
Who's someone who inspires? Well, I was talking about my love for animals. Jane Goodall, who recently passed away, one of my big heroes. Talk about staying on message for decades, Another hero of mine is I love Brene Brown. I love her work on vulnerability and being honest and authentic and real. She inspires me. Martin Luther King. I just read an incredible biography. It won the Pulitzer Prize in 2024 of Martin Luther King, the new biography. This was post release of FBI files by Jonathan Ive. What an incredible story. He's a big inspiration to me. How you talk about servant leadership, how you lead with love. Yeah.
Your biggest hope for the rest, or I should say, your biggest hope for all of 2026? We're in a tough time here, a lot of division going on. So, what's your biggest hope for next year? For this year, sorry.
This year. Well, for this year.
Let me do that again. Hold on one second.
Okay.
I'll edit this out. The episodes are going to come out in January. So when I say this year, 2026. So let me rephrase. I'll do it again. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right. We end with this question. What is your biggest hope for 2026?
Biggest hope for 2026 is that collectively as human beings, no matter what country we're from or what religion we practice or don't practice or what political persuasion we are, that we choose love over fear on a day-to-day basis, that all of us just keep choosing love over fear. And I think we're going to be okay.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Good. Okay. We have survived the speed round, so you can unstrap your seatbelt. And we're bringing it home like we do with every guest with 2 questions, Martha. Here we go. The love question, love in action question. So how do we lead with more practical, actionable love day in, day out, whether you're the CEO or, say, somebody that is the supervisor down in the front lines?
Well, to that one, I would say it's the title of the book. Catch people doing things right. That's one way to put your love into action, is to look at something that somebody has done right and let them know about it, acknowledge them, lift the vibration by saying it out loud. Yeah.
I forget who it was, whether it was, I think it was John Gottman that did research where he found that we have to have positive moments. I don't know how many, 4 or 5 throughout the day, and so that's so much in line with catching people doing things right, praising somebody, lifting someone up, being a source of encouragement, speaking truth into someone, helping people know that they belong, that they're part of the tribe, right? All those things are leadership essentials that will help you to succeed. Not only in business, but in life.
Yes, and don't beat yourself up if you tend to look at the negative, because we are all programmed with negative bias. That's how we survived as a species, to kind of see what's wrong in the environment and jump on it and correct it. So it's just, but we need to understand that that's working in our amygdala, and we have to overcome that consciously. And catch people doing things right is one way we can do that.
Yeah. All right, bring us home. What's that one thing you want people to take away from this conversation?
The one thing I want people to take away from this conversation is that no matter what your role is in life, I'm betting you're a leader, because leadership is an influence process. And if you're looking to influence the behavior of another person, you're a leader. And leadership is something we do with people, not to people. It's about empowering people, not controlling them. So I would just say, recognize your leadership. Recognize that leadership is love. And it's about loving yourself. It's about loving your mission. It's about loving your people. And loving yourself enough to get out of the way so that other people can be magnificent.
This is one of the books that I'm going to recommend for 2026. I'm going to put it in my top 10. Okay. And the book again is called Catch People Doing Things Right: How Ken Blanchard Changed the Way the World Leads. You can't miss the cover because Ken's mug is on it. It's been real. It's been fun. And finally, we get to meet, at least as close as you can get to real life, right? We can see each other and have a real conversation. And I so much appreciate you being here today.
This has just been a joy. And again, I just love what you're doing in the world. Godspeed, keep it up. Keep up the good work. I'll be listening. I love your podcasts.
Thank you so much. All right. Where can people go to find you, to connect with you, learn more about you, or maybe even Ken?
Okay, well, they can learn more about me at marthalawrence.com. That's marthalawrence.com. There's all kinds of stuff about this book. But I encourage people to go to blanchard.com if you want to learn more about leading with love and putting people first leadership. And then if you're interested in Ken's work, we've got a website called kenblanchardbooks.com, and you'll find all of Ken's work on that page. So kenblanchardbooks.com.
Fantastic. I'll make sure I have all those resources in the show notes, folks, for you guys to just come on over and click on it. That's a wrap, folks, for Martha Lawrence and yours truly. Remember, in the end, love wins. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your leadership and business flourish.